Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brett Campbell Show. In today's episode, I speak with James Michael. James Michael currently runs a business where he recruits high-performing salespeople. Today, we actually break down the entire strategy of what do you look for when recruiting, not just recruiting salespeople, but recruiting anyone, in fact. James has literally worked with over 10,000 salespeople over the last 20 years. He has a background in the military, which has really formulated the skill sets that he has today and how he's able to help so many small businesses recruit their first salespeople into their organization. So if you're a business owner and you're looking to recruit salespeople, today is the episode for you. Make sure you listen in. But before you do, head over to iTunes. Please give us a 5-star review. If you give us a 5-star review, I'm going to be very happy with you. Just take a screenshot of you hitting that 5 stars. Let me know, and then I'll keep you in the back of my mind, because you never know, one day the fairy might drop by and repay you a favor. So hopefully that's enough to get a 5-star review. If not, I don't know what else to do. How about we just give you this episode with James Michael. We talk about all things recruiting. We talk about why the recruiting process right now of hiring people it's all wrong. It's all backwards. Literally, I truly believe it is. I've personally sat in over 100 interviews over the last couple of years, and there is a right and a wrong way to do it. And if you haven't found the right people, the right talent for your business, then you're probably doing it the wrong way, and that's why this episode is here for you. So let's get stuck into the right way with myself and James Michael. James, mate, I have to say you're the first guest that I've had on this show with 2 first names. James Michael.
Right.
That's a talent.
Thanks, mate. I'd love to be able to say that, thanks to my parents, but not really. I mean, people used to say James Michael, and I said, yeah, as in George Michael. But then I stopped making that reference when he started hanging around toilets in LA.
Good move. Wise decision. Isn't it interesting though when you look at names, right? Like, it's an interesting thing within itself, and I look at names all the time from if I put my business lens on, or I look at my, when you hear some names, you're like, that you sound like a Hollywood star, or you sound like a, like Elon Musk, for example. Like, I mean, that name just sounds like an out of this world type name.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Anyway, I told you this show had the ability to go somewhere really fast, and look how we cracked open on this 30 seconds in, and we're talking about names. But mate, I wanted to get you on the show for, obviously more than just your awesome name, and to discuss a couple of things. One thing that I've seen you sort of pop up, in conversations. We sort of play in similar circles at times, and we help similar businesses out and so forth. And the last couple of years, you've really become the person that people will go to and talk to when it comes to recruiting high-performing people. And I know that comes from a bit of your background, right? Which I don't know too much about, so I'm certainly wanting to find out a little bit more about that and sort of what got you into this whole recruiting space. So let's start pre-recruiting. Where did this all start from for you?
Okay. So look, the quick potted history, my first career straight out of school was into the military. And it's an environment which really does bring out the very best in people, right? They just have this amazing capacity to deconstruct you, reconstruct you in the mold that they desire, and then point you in that direction, go. And so, I got to hang around a bunch of folks in that world who were exemplars of high performance, right?
Do you think, can I ask a question of that? Do you think that's because, I'm always curious about this, right? Because, you just outlined a roadmap that I personally think every young person who's sort of not really sure on what they're doing should maybe go spend some time in the military. I've talked about this in other episodes. But You talked about being able to shape someone and point them in the direction. Is that through the structure of what they have there, or is it through the sheer... there's this, you could almost say, not a forceful nature, but, there's sort of the, put up or shut up type mentality. I've got friends who've been in the military and so forth. Why do you think it's, because you've got a very strong, feeling around why the military is so, I guess the outcome is amazing. Why is that? Do you think it's because of the structure? Is it just the sheer determination and perseverance that someone must go through, or is it a combination of everything?
Yeah, probably see all of the above, mate. In all honesty, I mean, the the military is probably the longest standing organisation that has been absolutely focused on delivering outcomes and objectives forever and a day, right? Profitability is not something that they think about or talk about, obviously, but delivering outcomes, no matter what, is something that they've got expertise in. And when you look at a lot of professions that have evolved over time, and in particular these days, project management had its origins in the military. So it's just been a really, really useful proving ground, I guess. And I say that with a little bit of caution because there's also some negative to that. I mean, often there are some concerns that the military is deployed in order to do R&D on things, whether it's tactics or whether it's weapons or whatever the case may be. And there is truth to that. But as a functioning organization that knows how to take raw material and produce something that is capable of delivering a particular outcome, there really isn't anything better. There really isn't. As a small kind of example, when I did my first promotion course, so you don't get promoted just because you're good in your job, which is what tends to happen in the corporate world. You have to do the course, right? And there will be 2 or 3 courses to be promoted to that particular rank. Even when you've done the course and you've been viewed and assessed and watched from all sorts of different angles, even when you've done the course, that still doesn't result in you being promoted. What they then do is watch you for another few months to see whether or not you're actually deploying the stuff that you were taught, right? So unlike in the corporate world where we tend to play sink or swim, they won't allow that to happen in the military.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head around that. It's the legacy of it, right? So when I got kicked out of high school, I was an apprentice. So I fell into an apprenticeship. I said I fell into because it was the only thing really around to fall onto at the time. So I took on that sort of 4-year pathway, right? Because that was 8,000 hours as an apprentice cabinet maker, and you had to do the hours. You had to go to Polytech. You had to tick all the boxes. You can't skip ahead, right? Yeah. Interesting enough, I certainly pushed every barrier along the way, and I did skip ahead. Interestingly enough, I don't know if you know, but if you've heard me talk about this before, but I have this ethos, and it could be a bad thing or a good thing, where if there's a faster way to do something, right, or there's a path of least resistance, why would we not be pushing the barriers to achieve that, right? And for me, when I was and the same thing through school and everything, right? I mean, it was even when I was playing cricket, I was like, why can't I just go play for the senior team right now? Well, Brett, because you're too small, you're too young. Like I was always pushing for the next thing. And with the apprenticeship, because I got to a point where I was like, I'm doing the same amount of work, if not more, and better than people who have been there for years, yet they were getting paid more, they were recognized more, they had more respect. And I was like, I just don't understand this, right? Where, I was always trying to break the mold, but I guess Army probably would have been a good thing for me because it would have broke me back into probably a lot more discipline because I was always trying to push the barriers. And I think with the military, you don't have that level of flexibility. It's like right now, you got people who start jiu-jitsu last year and they're already getting graded and they're getting the belts and they're moving through, and you're like, how are you a black belt and you've only been doing this 3 years? When it used to be you have to do 10, 15, 20 years worth of martial arts to then get that. I mean, I've got feelings of where I think it's coming from, but we're living in such a fast-paced world right now. Like everything in life is being exponentially sped up.
Yep.
Right? Which, to your point, I think is the nucleus of why the military potentially, because I mean, there's arguments either side. Like I look at university and go, because I went to university for 1 year and I lasted 1 year because I was like, there's no way I'm doing another 3 years of this degree. It's so slow. This is the way I could do the whole degree in 1 year. I felt like, so there are some industries and organizations that do need to be broken up and the opportunity to speed up. Right. So, mate, you're sharing. You started in the military.
And that set a really good scene for me because what I got to see was, including myself, individuals performing extraordinary feats in the most extraordinary circumstances, and 9 times out of 10 doing it with a silly grin on your face, right? And so that environment, that culture became part of my DNA. And, here I am 400 years later, a crotchety white-haired old man, and I'm still a soldier, right? When it's all said and done, I'm still a soldier. I mean, you can probably see my beret, sitting just behind me here. It's I can't let go of that world. It's so ingrained in me. So, but what it's also then done is instilled a whole range of other things that serve so well, right, in business life. Right, this capacity to set objectives, this capacity to build a plan around its execution, the capacity to then task individuals appropriately and clearly so that they know what's expected of them when, at what level, all that kind of thing. Risk taking. I mean, I'm innately a risk taker. Every profile I've ever done around risk, I'm generally 2.5 times more inclined to take risks than most other human beings. But
I'd love to know what my risk factor is. Off the chart, I reckon.
I know you are. So, and all of those are factors that bring about success in business, right? So post the military, and what I also ended up doing was studying behavioral psych. So the core themes that have kind of prevailed throughout of all of either my career or my business lives has been this notion of high performance individuals, high performance cultures, and the psychology of high performance, right? So, I held a number of different corporate roles. And then, as is often the case, you kind of get a bit up yourself and decide that you can do it better than being somebody else's employee. So, 2000 comes along and I go out and set up my own business. And as we fast forward to today, I've launched and operated 8 businesses. I'm running 4 at the moment. And
what's your most successful one?
The most successful one, I'm kind of hoping that my current one will soon become my most successful one. Damn COVID. But look, the most successful one was a business called Leadership in Action. I ran that for 13 years. As the name would suggest, it's a leadership development business. And it saw us taking groups of 10 managers at a time out to a 1,000-acre property that I had just past Lithgow and immersing them in a world of living hell for 4 days.
So you took them to boot camp.
Equivalent to boot camp. So it was teaching them leadership skills in the face of adversity, right? Anybody can sail a yacht in calm waters, as the saying goes. The true test of captaincy arrives when the storm hits. This is 4 days of stormy weather. And I didn't necessarily set out to build a world-class training and development program, but I ended up there. And I'm really, really proud of what my team and I did over that 13-year period and the impact we had on people and the lives that we changed. And the fact that we got to charge them stupid money for, putting them through absolutely some of the toughest circumstances some of them had ever found themselves in their lives.
I think a big thing that I draw from that as well is anyone can be an absolute weapon on the boxing bag. When they're hitting the boxing pads, it's like, whoa, you got a strong right, or that jab is nasty. But as soon as you put someone else in there, throw them back, the whole world changes, right? The view, the perspective. That's why I love the immersion of things, and I've had a number of discussions about this over the last few months, especially with COVID and the world moving sort of into an online world. And I mean, it's already has been moving there. It's been there for some time. We've just had the ability to also have the offline component to it. And people are like, oh, do you see, the offline world sort of dissipating and it just becoming everything predominantly online? And I certainly feel that that's where things are moving to, and there's a much deeper explanation to all of that. But what I don't think will ever disappear is that full immersion, person to person, energy to energy shift that can happen when you take deep dives. There's something of watching a Tony Robbins video, but when you're in the front row, I remember I was at one event. This is funny, kind of creepy too, but I was in the front row of one of Tony's events, right at the front, and he come up in front of us, and he's standing there and he's talking, and he, I don't even know why I'm fucking sharing this, but he's standing there, and then he's yelling on the top of his lungs, and he lets out this crazy, like, it looked like a fire hose out of his mouth, right? Just spit. And he spat all over my face and it like landed in my mouth. And I'm like, oh my, like it was just you could never get, not that I want Tony Robbins spit in my mouth, but the point that I'm making there, everyone, right? I've got
That's
a point.
Immersion.
I've got a point here. It's the feeling, like the embodiment of that, whether someone's spitting in your face or you actually can feel the energy around you. Yeah. That's
Absolutely.
where, especially when it comes to mindset, right? That's where the shifts happen. Like you can learn something, you can read something and be, motivated by it. But when you're internally inspired by it, that generally, from my perspective, comes from person to person, immersion, 100%. Energy on energy, right?
100%. And that was the key thing about the program. And we used to refer to it, when we were selling it and the HR people had to get, do sign off on it, we would refer to it as an immersive learning program. We are going to immerse your people in a particular environment and set of circumstances. And then the other piece, and that's what you've just touched on, is that when you get an emotional learn, that 10x's a logical learn. When you had an emotional response, that light bulb moment, that stays with you forever. And, I'm really proud of the fact that, we put literally thousands of people through that program over the 13 years. And so many of them, so this was started in 2003, so many of them still make contact with me, make reference. I mean, I had a chat with a guy last week who had a problem that he wanted to help me just, spend 10 minutes working through. Yeah. And he was using all of the stuff that we had taught him back in 2005.
Yeah.
So yeah, really, really proud of that.
So you've evolved then from, you studied the human psyche, etc., which opens many pathways, right? I uncovered marketing through that. Right. But secondary to that, then you train a lot of salespeople, over 10,000 salespeople that you've worked with. But now your space is recruiting high-performing people. Now, a lot of people who listen to this are business owners, and we're constantly recruiting here at Klaxon, and we're always looking for high-performing people and talented people, and we're in an industry that's so new that there really isn't talent out there that's proven, right? So I understand how hard that can be at times and how valuable it is to have intelligence around being able to identify, people who could potentially be a great asset to your business and you be an asset to them, which is a big talking point as well. But mate, tell me, how do you go about recruiting high-performing people? Let's break it down.
All right. So let me start off by kind of sharing with you and, the audience that the golden standard that we've all been taught about how to recruit, the holy grail of get a cover letter, get a resume, conduct a structured interview, do a personality assessment, do reference checking. So those 5 core fundamentals that have been recruitment as we've known it for our entire lives. According to a Harvard study done not so long ago, that sum total of all of those things has a predictive reliability of 0.26, where the ideal number is 1, right? And again, to give that context, as a psychologist, if you're thinking of using a particular tool or an assessment to get an understanding of somebody or a situation, if that tool doesn't have at least a 0.70 correlation, it will not be used, right? Because it doesn't do what it says it can do.
So you're talking 70% success rate, right? When you're saying 0.7, just
for want of a better.
For the people out there who are stuck on 0.25, what does that mean? I got your back. Yeah.
Right. So it just doesn't work. And, so there's a whole range of things. So that's the one thing I want to kind of put down on the table for everybody to kind of digest as well. The recruitment crystal ball has been broken for quite some time. And I think one of the best pieces of evidence to that fact is that according to Salesforce, for the 2019 calendar year, 56% of salespeople around the world did not hit their sales target. Right? So that's slightly more than 1 in 2 of the people who were hired to do a job failed to do their job.
Yeah. How much of that, though, do you think is predicated on the sales targets being too high versus not enough training, not enough effort, not enough relentlessness? What?
Yeah, look, I'm not suggesting that the recruitment thing is the entire thing that's broken. I mean, there's a whole range.
Of course, we could open up
people into a shit environment.
Yeah.
What help? What hope have they got of performing? Yeah. But so the key differences are about having an understanding around the fact that your character, your nature, is far more important than the bag of tools that you carry around. Right?
So you're talking if you're someone who's looking for a job now, you're saying the employee,
or as an employer, right? The
Yep.
candidate's nature, their hardwired character, who the hell they are as a human being, and how they conduct themselves has far more weighting on the likelihood of them being successful than whether or not they've sold your widget to your marketplace before, right? And there's a saying that I use, and that is that it really doesn't matter how much training you give to a donkey, it's never going to win the Melbourne Cup, right? It eats what a horse eats, right? It looks like a horse. It dumps what a horse dumps. It really, really wants to be a horse. Seriously, boss, I'm going to be the best horse ever. Not going to happen. And what I see is too many people who get tricked into thinking that they've found a horse, a racehorse, and they haven't. They've found a donkey disguised as a racehorse, right? You're asking it to do something it's not capable of doing because it's not in its nature. And so, the approach that we take, and you can kind of see my little mousetrap described behind me here, not that anybody going to be able to read that, but
I can read it.
The approach that we take is very much about gathering data, right, around the individual and getting a deep understanding about who they are and how they perform and how they function. Yes, we screen for competence, but we're far more interested in who they are as an individual and as a human being.
So as a recruiting business where, just to sort of fill in some gaps here, you find talent for businesses, right?
Yeah, so we specialize in helping small business owners to recruit their first sales professional. So that's our, we're very, very niched.
Yeah, cool. Okay, sales only.
Sales only,
okay.
Well, in this business. So I've got 4 brands. This is my main brand. It's where I spend most of my time. So yeah, Justified Talent, we help small business owners recruit their first sales professional.
Okay, cool. So let's say, someone's listening, they're like, I want my first sales professional. What do we do?
The first thing we need to have an understanding of is who are we really looking for, right? And where a lot of business owners will think that means a job description, that's not describing the person. That's describing the tool bag they need to bring along to work. Who is the human being? So we spend quite a lot of time getting an understanding of, what should the hardwired nature of the individual be? Right, in terms of how goal-driven do they need to be, how assertive do they need to be, how sociable do they need to be, how accommodating, how independent. There's about 13 different.
And how do you find that out, other than doing personality tests and stalking them on social media and coming up with your own sort of synopsis?
So we've got a diagnostic tool that we run with our clients, right? From the very beginning to get an understanding. I spend time with the client getting an understanding of what their current sales process and methodology is. Obviously, we've got to have clarity about who you're selling to, what problems are you solving, and so because of the fact that I've also then in another business that I'm not part of anymore, but I've coached and trained and mentored and delivered workshops to over 10,000 salespeople. I've got this capacity to quickly develop an understanding of who are you looking for versus who is she looking for, and you may well be in the same sort of space, but culturally you're different. Your sales methodology is different, so we're looking for slightly different people. So we spend quite a lot of time up front getting absolute crystal clarity around what does the ideal person look like. Now, are we going to find ideal? Maybe not, but to begin with, do we have
down to I want a 24-year-old male, hungry, like really, really detailed.
Yeah, very, very detailed.
The great thing is if people, and this is what I love about business, right? It's actually not that all complicated as many people make it out to be, because basically the process you're going through here essentially is exactly what we would say to someone if they're wanting to generate more business and they're wanting to, generate more leads, from a marketing perspective, from a sales perspective, it's like you got to find your end vision, right? Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind.
Yep.
So who do you actually want to turn up to this offer? And like, you don't have to hire someone that you really like necessarily either. And when I say that you like, it's like you got to go, is this outcome oriented? Are we looking at pure numbers, sales targets, or are we actually wanting to build a family where we could all hang out and love each other and have a great time, So Begin with the end in mind. Cool. All right. So let's say we've figured out, here's who I want, this sort of type of person. How much detail do you go into? We talking 1 page, 2, 3, 5 pages of information?
Typically 3 pages of information.
How much time would you suggest someone spend on digging deep and finding their perfect avatar?
At least an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay.
Really.
Yep.
You know, like particularly for a sales role.
I mean, if you can't do that, you're bloody get out of business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Right. So from there, it's then about building the attraction campaign, right? It's about putting the word out there in as many different forums as possible. So, you know, most people will be familiar with Seek, and yes, it's the dominant player in the market in terms of job ads, but it's not the only player. You know, there's an ever growing range of platforms that people can be on. You know, the one that's probably the most exciting and also probably the most frightening at the same time that's just about to hit Australia is Google Jobs.
Really?
So, yeah. So people will be able to...
Heard it here first. I haven't heard of Google Jobs yet.
Cool. So, I mean, Facebook allows you to advertise roles now, right? That's been around for a while, right? But Google Jobs is operating, you know, as you would expect in the Northern Hemisphere.
Makes sense.
What it simply allows an individual to do is to type in, you know, the keywords of the kind of job they're looking for, and then every single job that is looking for that kind of role or that, you know, those key search terms will be presented to you on a platter. And you can just go tick, 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 and apply for them.
Well, that's going to give a shitty quality candidate, isn't it?
Potentially.
That comes back to the process, and I'm sure we'll talk about that because that's super important.
Go through all that selection process afterwards. But so it's about getting the word out there. Now, you know, with the campaigns and you know, again, you know, for the majority of my clients, and I would imagine a lot of your clients who are at the kind of smaller end of town and wanting to grow, you know, we have to accept that we're not Qantas, we're not BHP, we're not Lend-Lease. We're not the big end of town. We don't have squillions of dollars to throw at attraction campaigns and retention campaigns. You know, we just don't have that capacity. So number one, so, you know, our capacity to attract good quality talent is already hampered, right? It's reinforced, particularly right now, by the fact that joining a small business is always risky, always has been, but it's doubly risky right now, right? And so unless your campaign really, really appeals to your ideal avatar, so come back to, you know, your language, unless your campaign absolutely appeals to your ideal avatar, you're on the back foot. You know, you're missing the mark. You're not attracting the person that you want.
And here's here's something that grates me. Well, it doesn't necessarily grate me. I mean, I did this when I first, 13 years ago, when I put out my first job. I had no idea what I was doing, right? I went to Seek, put out a job for an admin because I needed an assistant. I had like 270 people apply for it. I went through like the first 10 CVs. I was like, cool, those 3 look good. I interviewed 3 and hired 1. It was a disaster, right? But but you live and you learn. But here's what I didn't think, right? And this is what I see a lot of businesses do right now, is they think that they are the ones who holds the trump card by going, hey, I'm giving someone a job here. It's like, this is a 2-way interview process. They've got to decide whether or not they want to work with you. They might not like you or your business. You can go shove your money up your ass, right? It's like, so when people are doing that, you know, everything is a representation of your business, from how your Seek ad is. Like, we've had people apply for the job because they're like, just the way your ad was written was cool. I just knew that it'd be fun. So again, it comes back to that, really uncovering who you're looking for, but then even you, right? How are you wanting to be perceived by your potential employees? Yeah,
100%. You know, so and I'm actually running a workshop for Entourage tomorrow, and one of my opening lines is that recruitment today is 1 part marketing and then 3 parts behavioral science. You've got to get that marketing piece right to attract the ideal person, right? And so, you know, one of the things that I'll often talk to business owners about, you know, your traditional job ad kind of goes like this. This is who we are. And have you ever noticed that everybody's number 1 in their market? Must be a tiny market, right? Because everybody's number 1 in their market, right? So it's a whole bunch of best chest beating bullshit bravado. And then there's what I describe as the ransom note of demands. The ideal candidate will possess, right? It's a list of demands. So you're already starting to put people off. You're already starting to look unattractive and demanding as a place to go and work for, right? And then here's how to apply. So, the lesson that we teach and the methodology that we use is we describe you, right? So rather than describing the job, we start off by talking about your journey, your story, the business story. So we would talk about Claxon's journey and Claxon's vision and all that kind of thing. And so we create that sense of aspiration. But then underneath, so who are you? We then start to describe the characteristics that we'd identified in that first deep dive, right? So, would people describe you as, right? And we start to describe their characteristics. And the number of applicants that we have who say, your ad was amazing because as I read it, it felt like you were describing me. I actually said to my partner, hey, honey, look at this ad. Look, this is so me, right? So we've got to go down that line. The other thing that I really highly recommend that, the business owner, the hiring manager do today is invest in making a 3-minute hero video. Right? Video is the go today. I read somewhere just the other day that there's something like, so if I get this number right, 300,000 hours of video being uploaded per minute to YouTube. Right? And so if you're not in video now, again, what you're going to start conveying to your prospective employee is that you're behind the times. Right? And superstars don't want to work with organizations that are lost in the dark ages.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do a hero video. Talk about your journey. Talk about the reasons why. And again, don't put a ransom note in there. Don't tell them what you're looking for. Tell them what you're going to give them. Why should they come and work to you? And, to your point only a moment ago, you are not doing a sales superstar a favor by offering them a job. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because you've got to remember they've got to turn up every single day to this place, and let's be honest, sales is a repetitive job.
Yeah.
Right. It is, especially if you're like you have to run to the script and this is all you're doing, the same thing. You might have multiple different steps in your sales process, but it's all the same. So you've got to go. Imagine now. There's some people who they're happy if they're getting great commissions, they're getting the kickback from it. That'll last for so long.
Yeah.
Like that'll last for so long going, hit target, making the commissions, but I'm stuck in a corner room with no light or I'm in a cubicle and it's just the environment is just terrible, right? So there's so many elements that create satisfaction.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other areas that actually let's just stay with your process instead of jumping forward to that. So hero video, which outlines your business, who you are. Better when someone watches that video, they're like, yeah, I know who you guys are. I know I want to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And again, I'll keep saying this, for small business owners particularly, it's imperative because, and you've heard this saying, I'm sure plenty of times, we join good organizations, we leave dickhead bosses. Right? So here I am, an accomplished salesperson. Chances are I'm currently in a role. I've got a pipeline that's full because I'm good at what I do. Yeah, something's kind of getting up my nose. Maybe my boss is a dickhead. Maybe my comp plan isn't working. Maybe I'm a bit nervous about the viability of the business. And so I'm starting to look around. And what I want to know is, who are you? Like, who are you? What do you stand for? What are your values? Are you the kind of guy that I really want to spend 8, 10, 12 hours around? Are we going to get on? Are we going to resonate? Sure, we don't need to sink piss together or do Barbies on the weekend, but, are you going to be an oxygen thief like my current boss? Right?
Yeah.
And so, the video, the hero video, as we refer to it, has this capacity to very clearly portray who you are.
Yeah.
Right. And that can be a very, very powerful attraction piece.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's some value to add to that, and keep it authentic as well. Don't try and, create this unless this is what your business stands for, right? So we're very big on making sure that everything that you do and everything that goes out of the door in conversation or in marketing, video, is a representation of your brand, right? So what your business actually is, what it stands for, what is it, the look, the feel, everything about it. You know, and if you aren't this huge conglomerate, you know, you don't need to go and get a professionally designed video, although I'd probably lean to, hey, you know, I always recommend getting experts to do the fast track options for you in every area, you know. But in the same token, it's you could literally shoot it on your iPhone if you bloody wanted to. You know what I mean? Because here's the reality. That is going to be ahead of 99.9% of bloody other people who haven't done a video. So you're automatically going to stand out anyway, and it just shows you that, oh, these people are different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Look, if you've got an iPhone 10, which has got a decent camera, and you know, and I mean, we do all sorts of different levels of quality, but we'll always top and tail the video. So we have intros and outros, and you know, and we'll do captioning and all that kind of thing. So it begins to look slick just because of those little pieces.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if you want to DIY, if you're not using a recruitment agency and you want to DIY your own thing, there's a little app that I recommend called Brivio.
Brivio.
BRIVVIO. And it will allow you to do intros and outros in your own branding and all that kind of stuff. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Right?
So you put the ad up wherever it's going, or whether it's Google Jobs, Seek, Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere.
Get it on everywhere. Get it on LinkedIn, get it on Facebook, get it on YouTube.
What other tips do you have outside of Hero Video? Because we do a few different things, and I'd like to hear what you might suggest.
Yeah.
You know, so when you're putting the job out, you know, like for an example, what I'm referring to there is one of the things we say is, you know, we'll sort of put people under a little bit of test. You know, like, hey, send us a 60-second video of why you believe that you'd be a great candidate for the role, or why you would like to, why you're actually applying for this role. Tell us about yourself, right?
Absolutely.
If it's an administerial role, it'll be something along the lines of, you know, we'll say something about your cover letter has to have X, Y, Z on it in a certain place, so they're like paying attention, you know, like sort of putting in some little tripwires there, because for your example there, when it says Google Jobs comes out and you can just go and select 24 jobs, and all of a sudden the quality of people going through, you're like, shit, 80% of these people haven't even read this bloody job properly.
Yeah.
You know, they're just applying. So it's always nice, especially when you've got jobs that, you know, you put an admin job up, you're going to get a couple hundred people. Everyone is applying for those things, right? But it changes as you, the higher quality hire that you require. You know, you might not put as many trips in it, because, you know, you're not just going to not hire someone because they forgot to write a capital W in the corner of your your cover letter page. So what sort of things do you recommend people put in there as well? What's some stuff you've seen success with?
So we're talking now about the screening process, yeah?
Yeah, so you put what you'd put out in your job. So someone's gone and created a video. They've got, you know, the standard. Here's what the role is. Here's what's required, etc. What else do you sort of throw in there?
We've got a platform that we bring all of our applications into. So I'll talk a little bit about what the platform does per se, but perhaps as by way of a bit of backdrop, right? So I've been in recruitment for 2 years. I'm not a career recruiter, right? And the business is called Justified Talent, and I've just emphasized the word justified, right? Because of an incident that occurred a number of years ago. So a number of years ago, I went back into the employee world. I was the HR director for an American firm, but running ANZ, and we had to hire a sales director, right? And we were going to pay him $200,000 a year as base salary. And the CEO said to me, I want you to use my mate, and I'll change his name. Let's call him Jack. Right? I want you to use Jack because they were mates as the recruiter. I said, all right, fine, no worries. So, you know, long story short, we end up getting a guy. His name's Anwar. We bring him on board, and a week later, the invoice arrives, and the invoice is $42,000, right, from the recruiter, because it's a percentage of the salary, right, which is what traditional recruiters go by. And as I sign off the approval to pay and I hand it back to one of my team members, we have a bit of a chuckle, and I say, what do you reckon the recruiter's actually done to justify this fee?
Yeah.
Right? What do you reckon? And we have a bit of a laugh as to what we think that might be. 3 months later, we need to recruit a head of digital marketing. And so I go to Anwar, the sales director, and said, hey, with this DM role, do you reckon we should use Jack again? He said, who? I said, Jack. He said, who's Jack? Your recruiter, mate. What do you mean my recruiter? Jack, the guy that recruited you for us. I never met a recruiter, mate. The first time I knew about the job was when you guys contacted me.
Oh, wow.
So we paid $42,000 for an email with a resume attached to it. All right? More fool us.
Yep.
But that sowed the seed for me to then later on build a business called Justified Talent, right? So one of the things that we're not interested in is a cover letter or a resume, right? And I will strongly say to your audience, stop asking people for resumes and cover letters. They've got zero predictive value whatsoever, right? They're marketing documents. If you go onto Google and you search resume writing services and press enter, you will find there are over 7.7 million resume writing services available around the world. So that document that you see that catches your eye, 9 times out of 10 has been written by somebody else these days, right? Similarly, if you go to Google and you type in how to do well in a structured interview and just click on the videos, there's over 9 million videos of 3 minutes duration.
Yeah.
Right. So what does that mean instead? So, what we do is, again, when we start creating the campaign, we identify between 30 to 45 key competencies or experiences that the ideal person will possess or have done that's going to say, yeah, this looks like they're the right person from a can-do perspective, right? And we create a series of screening questions out of that. Right. And the screening questions, and anybody can do this. You can do it using a Google form. Yep. Somebody applies to you and says, yeah, I'm interested in your job. Send them a Google form, send them a Google link and say, complete this form. Yep. Right. But the questions need to be prefaced in 2 particular ways. At interview, will you be able to demonstrate? Right. So if half of your questions start with that phrase, at interview, will you be able to demonstrate? And then the other one is, will your referees confirm? Right? So 2 deliberately psychologically loaded words or sentences, phrases. We've had now in excess of 5,000 applications over the last 2 years for the roles that we've advertised. And I am still blown away at the number of people who say no, 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 no to 10 or more of the 45 screening questions that we will have put up. Why? Because we prefaced it with, at interview, will you be able to demonstrate, or will your referees be able to confirm?
I mean, it automatically adds, oh shit, I'm up against the chopping block immediately.
Yeah.
It's like, what, I was just going to find out about the job, not try and show my selling skills.
Right. Okay.
But it makes sense.
That's stage 1.
Yep.
Stage 2, and you've alluded to it, we absolutely do this with every single job, is we ask them to do their cover letter via video. Right? So we've got a system that sends them a link. They click on the link. It activates their camera. Underneath, we've got a series of questions, right? So it's 2 or 3 questions, but essentially so tell us about yourself. Tell us about the sorts of experiences you've had that align with what we're looking for, and tell us why you're the ideal person for the role, right? Now, often as not, I'll say to my clients, look, I'm not overly concerned with the actual answers. I mean, the answers, if they've got great answers, great. But what I'm more interested in is, are they confident? Are they an effective communicator? And do they have presence? And are they clearly comfortable with technology? Because if you don't have those 4 things today in sales,
Yeah.
Right.
Are you committed to actually go above and beyond to get the job? I mean, if you're not committed to do every single thing that you possibly can when you don't even have the job, geez, just imagine if you do hire them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So I like the additional steps, where you send questions. For a lot of people, they're like, I don't want to do too much to scare people away. But the reality is you need to be very, very diligent with who you bring into your team. Hire slow, fire fast,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Or else your organization's going to be hindered by the speed in which you can remove people who aren't necessarily the best for your business, right? And that comes back to you not spending the time up front when you could have asked those questions.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what we do a number of steps here. So we're not just a singular step, you know, the old school of you get a resume, call them up to come and do an interview. At the end of the interview, you either offer them a job or not. I mean, geez, that's crazy. I can't believe I did that in the early years. But again, had no idea. But now it's, you know, even from anyone who wants to come and work at Klaxon, is one step of their process, they have to go and do an entire brief. You know, so let's say someone's come in to be a digital growth strategist, right? And I've had people sit in the meetings and they're like, on the interviews, you know, and we'll ask them questions, go, you know, like, what would you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like absolutely top of the game, top of industry, what would you rate your skills at, you know, Facebook advertising or Snapchat advertising or whatever in there? People are like, oh, about an 8 or a 9. And then you're like, okay, and then you dig a bit deeper and you're like, oh, this definitely ain't a 9. And then you get them to go and complete a brief like, okay, here's a mock client. Here's what their ad budget is. Here's what they're doing here. Here's the products. Come back to us with what you would do from a strategy level. And you're like, oh my God, like, you know, where someone can sit in an interview and do a good interview. And salespeople especially, right? Salespeople, just to enter, to be putting your hand up for a sales role, you have to be a different human being, right?
Yep.
To start with. So anyone can sort of start a sales process off, you know, really well. But do they have the credibility and the runs to be able to keep going with it? So, mate, back to your process. So you qualify with different questions, which I certainly like, and I'd highly recommend people do that. It takes a little bit more time up front, but you're going to get a far better quality. You make them submit a video application, which is great. Then what? So information's come through. Does that stop? Is that where it stops for you? What do you?
No, so for us, we go down 2 or 3 further roads. So, you know, obviously we do an interview.
As the recruiter, yep.
Yep, you know, you would expect that of a recruiter.
Yep.
The difference for us is that our interviewers are not career recruiters; they're career sales managers. Mm-hmm. So they've hired, fired, performance managed, coached, trained, and developed salespeople for at least 10 years. I actually don't want career recruiters in the business, right? So we engage sales managers. They contract to us. And they do the interviews for us. So, you know, they know what they're looking for and looking at. They can smell it, they can hear it, they can see it, and they dig much, much deeper. So there's the interview piece. But the bit that I'm really kind of keen on for business owners who are going to DIY is, in some respects, almost to skip the interview process in terms of that formal interview. Yes, you've got to interview them in terms of, do I like you? Can I imagine being in the same space as you 10, 12 hours a day? Are you going to fit into our culture? Do you have, you know, similar values and all that kind of thing? So yes, you've got to have that conversation. But in terms of working out whether or not they've got what it takes, and you've kind of alluded to it just a moment ago, Brett, test them, like get them to do stuff, right? That is a replica of the job. Right. So at Living Social, it was an organization that I worked at a number of years ago. And if anybody's not familiar with Living Social, you know, the nearest competitor was Groupon. Everybody's heard of Groupon. Yep. So it was one of those daily deals sites. And so we used to hire folks whose job it was to go and reach out to small business owners, and particularly in quick service restaurants and things like that, get them to become members. Get them to put together a discounted offer for our members, right? And then go 50-50 on the earnings with us, right? So reduce your price and then give half to us, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to put, you know, potentially tens of thousands of members in front of you, right? And so once we got down the tail end in the recruitment exercise, we would send the finalists a couple of workbooks, right, which they'd have to print off, and they would be given a bit of a story and a bit of a background to what was called Phil's Italian Restaurant, right? You would then come in next Thursday and you would meet Phil, right? Sell to Phil. Yep. Sell the Living Social value proposition to Phil. Go, do it. right? So rather than me asking you a bunch of questions where you get to tell me a bunch of stories and the best storyteller wins, right? Don't tell me stories, show me, demonstrate it to me, do it for me, right? There's another one that we do with real estate people. So people looking to get into real estate who don't have real estate experience. That's hard graft, that job is, right? And so one of the things that we get them to do is in the final stages, we get them to compile a list of 10 people in their own network who are homeowners. And then they've got to get on the phone and ring them and say, hey, it's James. How you going? It's been a while. I know. I'm sorry. Listen, you're not going to believe it, but I'm thinking of getting into real estate. No, seriously, I am. But before I make that decision on what I need to come and have a conversation with you. I'm not going to try and sell you anything. I'm not authorized to sell anything, right? But I want to have a conversation with you and ask you your opinion of real estate, right? So then they go to the meeting and we give them 13 questions that they have to ask these 10 different people. Question number 3, if you were going to compare real estate agents with another profession, like lawyer goes with doctor, real estate agent goes with used car salesman, right? That's what most people say, right? So these 13 questions are questions that are difficult to ask. They're difficult to hear the answers to. And we want them to ask 10 different people those same 13 questions in the space of 7 days. So what have I tested for? Will they pick up the phone and ask for an appointment? Will they attend the appointment? Will they ask difficult questions, hear difficult answers, and go and do it again and again and again with a sense of urgency? The very few of them come back from that exercise, right? But the ones that do, I absolutely know, not only can you do the job, but you will do the job.
Yeah.
Right. So to the degree that you can as a business owner, particularly around sales roles, you know, if you can create an exercise that you get them to do that helps you understand not only can they, but will they, you're on a winner.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think the sort of, I guess, big takeaways when it comes to hiring anyone, right, regardless if it's just sales, is being able to create mock examples of where the behavior will be replicated. So it's not just an exact mirror of, you know, let's say you, in your case, you know, property, right, or a real estate agent. It's like you don't have to get them to go and sell a property, but to your point is replicating the feelings and the situations that they might go through.
Yeah.
All right. Because I think it's so valuable that business owners take more time up front to make sure they're screening the right person and they understand that they're also being screened to see if they want to be a part of your business, right? If they like you as well. Don't sit on your high horse and think because you're an employer that you're the savior of the world, because you're not, right? So, mate, what else have we got there to wrap the process up? So, just to recap, if there's someone they're wanting to create or hire new people, and let's say they want to do it themselves, I would firstly say, you know, we've used recruiters in many occasions. We've also done it ourselves as well. The value of a recruiter from our perspective is just being able to tap into people because here's the other part, right? And this is probably more so for when you're really trying to find really good talent. What we've found is they're not necessarily out there looking for a job.
Correct.
Right? So the beautiful power of a recruiter is you'll be out there building relationships with people who already have jobs who aren't necessarily looking for a change until, all of a sudden, hey, how would you like to relocate to the Gold Coast? And, you know, and here's what it's going to look like, da-da-da-da. So we've actually just done a couple of really big hires here through that process as well.
Yep.
You know, but we wouldn't have come across that. So definitely, if you're sitting there and you're wanting DIYing it yourself, reach out to a recruiter, you know, and if it's from a sales perspective, reach out to James and see what he could do for you guys. But really take time in making sure, it's like anything in business, you've got to have a strategy. You've got to have a process around it. Don't rush. I was actually talking to someone this morning, giving them some advice around hiring new people for their team as well. And I was like, you need to create like a multi-step, because it's not just because you need time yourself, right? Like I've interviewed people on the first interview and I'm like, shit, yeah, we're hiring them. And then we get to like interview 2 or 3 and I'm like, oh, wait on, something's changed. right? So know your own vices, and having these steps in place are going to be critical. What have we missed? What have we not talked about from a recruiting perspective?
Look, I don't, there's the whole thing around whether we do reference checks or not. I mean, did anybody ever nominate a bad referee? No, they didn't. You've got to be pretty damn good at reference checking to really unearth the truth. Yeah. Which is not something that a lot of business owners have got skill in, nor have they got time in. So, I'm 50-50. I'm ambivalent, if you like, around reference checking and the value of it. For us, our final stage, once we're down to the final 3, is that we do put them through a very deep psychometric assessment, which gives us the most amazing volume of information about them. And again, our promise to our clients is that, you're not going to make a decision on gut feel. You're going to make a decision on data. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we do data-wise that I haven't bothered sharing, right? But around getting real data understanding of who the individual is. Probably the more important thing, Brett, I would say right now is, and it's not so much about the recruitment, it's about the first 90 days, right? Too many business owners make the mistake of believing that their new hire salesperson is some kind of cruise missile, right? You got the job, here's the business card, there's the brochures, bye, door's always open. You can't do that in the first 90 days. Right? If you're not onboarding your people properly, if you're not absolutely knowing that they know rather than thinking that they know what the value proposition is, what problems you solve, the ideal client avatar, if you're making any assumptions whatsoever about that, and if you're making any assumptions at all about the level of activity that these people are putting in place, you're on a surefire slippery slope to tears, right? And there's a very simple formula that I share with every client of ours. And we actually work with our clients in the first 6 months. We help them performance manage their new hire. Right. But again, if you're going to do it yourself, there's a little formula that you want to have a conversation with your people around once a week. It's called QDQ. Right. So ask your salespeople to share with you their QDQ for the week. What quantity of conversations, how many dials or conversations or Zoom meetings have you had this week? Is it in the right direction, right? So that's the D.
Yep.
Who are you having these conversations with, right? Are they the ideal client avatar? Are they the decision maker, right? And then the final Q is quality. What's the quality of the conversation? And the only way you will know the quality of the conversation your salesperson is having is when they can describe back to you the world of the prospect. If they can't describe in detail the pain and the world of the prospect, they're not having a quality conversation, and it's not going to lead to a sale. QDQ.
QDQ, mate, I love it. I think we'll wrap up on that right there. But the takeaway point is, there's a process throughout the entire bloody journey, right? It's not you hit the nail on the head with. You could go to a recruiter, you could find some amazing talent, but if you don't know how to keep them, you're going to keep going back, and you're going to be blaming the recruiter because you send me someone who's not qualified enough. But it's like, well, do you even have a sales process? Do you have a way of tracking, measuring success of someone when they come on board? Which is another topic for another podcast. But mate, appreciate you jumping on and sharing your wisdom and knowledge.
Mate. Thanks for having me,
mate. It's an absolute pleasure. And where can people find out about you?
Justifiedtalent.com.
Justifiedtalent.com. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, mate.
That's
thanks so much, James.
voice.
It was awesome. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.